This is a painting by the Dutch painter Rembrandt. It's called The Return of the Prodigal Son. He painted it in the year 1668, which was like 1 year before he died. It's believed to be the last painting that he created before he died the next year. And I want to invite you just to glance at this painting for a second. It beautifully captures the heart of this story. And there's been a lot of Christian writers and thinkers that have reflected on this painting as well as the parable in the New Testament. Henri, Nouwen, Tim Keller. I want to mention some of the things that they point out about this. One of the first things that we notice as we look at this painting, though, is you see the father figure. He's bent over with his hands on the son. And the son that's kneeling there is the younger son in the story. You can see that he looks a little disheveled. He has one shoe on, one shoe off, and he is leaning into his father's embrace. The story of the lost son, we're told in Luke 15, is that there's a father and he has two sons. And the younger son comes to him and says, "Dad, you know what? I want my inheritance. I want what's due me." Which in that culture basically would have been saying, "Dad, I wish you were dead because all I really care about is the money that you have coming my way." Shockingly, what the father does is he decides that he's going to divide up his property and sell it in order to give his son this request. And so he does that. So the younger son gets the money, he gets his inheritance, and we're told that he leaves his father's household and he goes off into a distant country. And he begins to use all of it up. He starts just to have wild living, and he wastes it on like food and prostitutes and just kind of having this party lifestyle. And he loses everything. He loses all of his inheritance in a pretty short amount of time, and he gets to this point where he has nothing. And we're told that the only way that he can survive is he starts to work with pigs. He's in a pig pen tending pigs. Now, some of us think, oh, that sounds like a great job. Pigs are cute. Love going to the fair and seeing the little baby pigs run around. It's awesome. Or the pig races. Have you seen the pig races? Amazing stuff. But for a good young Jewish boy, working with pigs was like the last thing that you would do. That's an unclean animal. That was thought to be incredibly disrespectful. You would never do that. So here this boy, this young son, doesn't have anything. He's just tending pigs. And he has this thought, I'll go back to my father, and at least if I go back to him and I tell him, hey, I've messed up, and I know that I've sinned against you, maybe you will let me be a servant in your household. So that's what he does, is he goes back to his father to tell him, hey, I've messed up. I just want to be a servant again. The father embraces him. That's the younger son. But then there's this older son on the other side in red. And Rembrandt captures this perfectly too, because in the story, the older son, he's the good son. He stayed home. He was respectful. He was dutiful. He made sure that he was keeping up with his father's business. But we learn that his heart is cold. And you can notice in this painting here, his arms are crossed. He has this look of disdain on his face for his father. He can't believe that his dad would be so gracious towards this younger son. He's full of resentments. He's calloused. He's almost even out of the frame, just kind of fading into the background. But the father, what he does in the story is he responds to both of his sons in the same way, with compassion, with mercy. Now, depending on our stories, we may relate to one of those sons. Some of us in here, we might feel like that younger, rebellious son, and maybe that is kind of what our life was like, that we left home, that we sort of did our own thing. We felt like we messed up, and we came back, and we experienced some grace and forgiveness. And maybe some of us, we feel a little bit more like that older brother. Yeah, I was the one that was responsible. I was dutiful. I stayed home. I was good. But we still had our own brokenness. We still had our own pain. We tend to focus on which son we are, but the point of the story is for us to look at the father and to consider how the father responds and reacts. Luke 15:20, we have the first response. The younger son is coming home. He's saying, I'm just going to give this speech to my father, and then maybe he'll let me come back into the household. I can be a servant. It says this in Luke 15:20. This younger son, he got up, he went to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. I love this phrase. It's been called the most beautiful verse in the Bible. That the son is a long way off, but his father sees him. And why does he see him? Because he's been waiting for his son, and he runs towards him. Jewish men didn't run. It was just not something that you did. It was kind of like reckless and disrespectful. But this father runs to his son. He embraces him. It says that he is filled, not with anger, not with frustration, not with annoyance, but he's filled with compassion for him because he's his son. And he embraces him. And this young son, he has this speech that he's rehearsed. He's trying to get it out. Dad, I know I've messed up against you. I've made a mess of everything. But the father doesn't even let him get the speech out before he continues and he starts just barking these orders. Verse 22, it says, the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they begin to celebrate. The son can't even get the speech out, and the father begins to act with this compassion. He clothes him, a ring, sandals, signs that he's not a servant, but that he actually is a son. And then he finds the fattened calf. This is the good meat, right? The prime, meat. It says, let's grill that up. Let's have a party. We're going to celebrate because you're home. Maybe some of us, we've had that experience in life where we know we've messed up, where we've had that sense of coming back, and we've experienced that kind of welcome reception, that forgiveness, that grace. That's powerful. That's beautiful. We're all moved by that. It's probably all a part of our story in some way. This younger son back home, embraced by his father who has mercy and compassion for him. We're told that there's an older son too. And the older son sees all this commotion, sees the party happening, but chooses not to go in. Verse 28, it says, the older brother became angry and he refused to go in, so his father went out and pleaded with him. Now notice this. The younger son, he's coming home, and the father sees him and runs towards him, filled with compassion for him. And then you have this older son, the son that stayed home, and he's angry. He doesn't want to go to the party, so he doesn't join in, but the father still goes towards him. The father still responds to him with the same mercy, with the same compassion. The older son is resentful. He's angry. He can't believe his father would be so gracious. And what's really the big irony in the story is the younger son is coming home and he thinks, Dad, I just want to be a servant. I just want to work for you. I just want to be a slave. Like, that's fine. That's who I'm going to be. And the father says, no, you're a son. This is who you are. You're in my household. I love you. I'm for you. And then the older son, who has been home the entire time, who has always been in the father's household as a son, he views himself like a servant, slaving away for his dad, not realizing the proximity that he had the whole time. And this is why the father then says to this older son, verse 22, he says, my son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he's found. He says, son, you've been here the whole time. Everything that I've had, it's yours. We had to celebrate, though, because your brother has come home. This older son didn't see the privileged position that he had. And the father's heart is for him in the same way that it's for this younger son. I love this story. It's beautiful. It's challenging. We see ourselves in different characters in the story. But again, the point of it, the point that Jesus is trying to make, is to get us to see the heart of the Father. That this is who God is. That the Lord is compassionate and gracious and slow to anger. This is the story of the Bible, how God has always acted, how God has always positioned himself being for his people and inviting us to experience that love and to experience what it means to come home. Older translations of the story would call it the parable of the prodigal son. And I always thought that was confusing because I didn't know what the word prodigal meant. And I looked up the word prodigal, and it means lavish and excessive. So the commentators thought, well, it's the prodigal son because this younger son, he's lavish and excessive in his money and his spending and what he does. But I've heard many people remark that maybe it's better to call it the prodigal father because he's the one who actually is excessive and lavish in his grace, in his mercy, and his compassion.